Hello everyone, welcome to the episode 76 of SoLeadSaturday. The guest we have today, Federica Bressan, is a researcher and science communicator. She holds 2 MDs in music and musicology and a PhD in computer science. The vision underlying her work concerns the co-evolution of technology and culture. A Fulbright and Marie Curie alumna, as a researcher, she has published 30 plus peer reviewed articles, chaired international events, and guest edited a special issue on the Journal of New Music Research. As a communicator, she is currently busy with the production of video interviews in English and Italian, which she hosts on her YouTube channel. She started the podcast Technoculture in 2018 and writes about science and society. This looks amazing. I'm sure there are a lot of computer science people out there who would be looking forward to this episode. So let's just welcome her and hear about her career journey. How did she find her area of interest and managing to lead that? Hello, Federica. Very happy to have you on the show and really appreciate all your time and consideration being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And moving towards our first section is about the passion and interest. So the first question that we have is, how did you find your interest in the computer science or technology? What steps did you take to pursue your passion, and what motivates you to be an entrepreneur? So there are two questions, yeah.
It's a lot of questions. I'm not often asked these questions. And the honest answer about technology, I think, is because when I was a little girl, my dad was always tweaking with radios and building circuits. Like our house was a workshop of electronics, and he was just building and taking radios apart, and I was fascinated by that. I didn't know that it would become such passion in my life, but when it was time to choose what high school to go to, I had chosen a high school that taught you how to make circuits and tweak these kinds of things. But my father opposed me in that decision because he wanted me to study the, Latin, the classic literature and general culture you need for life. And the fights we had, I cannot tell you. I ended up giving in just because you're 14 then. And to this day, I hold it against him that I knew what I wanted, because I ended up doing technology. So today, I cannot solder and build things, but I talk about the technology, and I love learning about new technologies. So I think it started there, not just by seeing him. It's not just adoration, emulation, is that by having these things around the house, I would just play with them. So I used to walk around the house and record myself with a little microphone and a tape recorder. So I touched these things and I was fascinated by them. And growing up, I don't know if that makes your passion, but growing up, I have experienced, the advent of the internet. And just before that, mobile phones, because I didn't have one growing up. I had my first mobile phone when I was 16, and I was the first among so many of my friends. I got it for certain reasons. I still pushed to have it because I wanted to, but I have seen so much of this technology come into our hands, and I'm still amazed by what comes out. So I think that by the fast pace at which this technology evolves, that it keeps your interest alive, because there's always something new to discover. Yeah. So I think this is how I came to learn about technology. Plus, if I may add, probably it's just fun to play with, as if it's like a relationship with the environment. It's in the world. This technology is outside of you for the moment. I don't have chips implanted in my skin. This technology is like toys and stuff that is around your house, and it will be even more with domotics and smart homes. So it's a relationship with the environment also. I like that, the gadgets and the tools. And how did I pursue this passion? It pursued me. I never had a plan, I never had a plan to become what I am today, although I love it very much. I think it suits me, but I didn't have a plan. I believe more than in life, you just discover what to do next at every turn. Like the road reveals itself. So you know what pulls you, you know your passions. And I've always known my passions, but that I would be even, did anybody talk about podcasts 30 years ago? No, they didn't. So how could I have a plan to do this? So you just, it's a lifetime of decisions that takes you where you are. So I never set out a plan to be where I am now. But how I pursued it is probably the best answer is by being true to myself. Every time I had to take a decision in life, whether to do the PhD or not, or to take a job or not, to do this or that, you choose what you're passionate about. And if you follow your passions, then someone like you one day asks you about it. How did you do it?
Yes, that's very true, actually. And one more point that you mentioned, how fast we can see the technology evolving. That is very valid point, actually, because when we were growing up, definitely we did not have the access to the technologies, whether it was the computers or the mobiles. But now if you see kids in the early age, like, 6 and 7, they can use the mobiles like they are pro in that, like, they understand it, like even though like a 2 years 3 years old, they watch their YouTube channels, like, so it's like a great thing to see sometimes that when we see it as an advantage and the learning that they get at the early age. So thank you so much for sharing that point. Moving towards our next section is about questions from the audience, and actually we had a very great response for this particular episode. I think there are a lot of people who are the computer scientists out there who are like, did their undergrad or the masters or PhDs in the computer science, and they were really looking forward to this episode. And it was hard for me to shortlist the questions, but I tried to keep it a little more specific to you. So first question that we have is, if you would like to inspire others to be a technologist, what would you like to tell them? Why learning technology is important?
So I think that I would like to motivate and inspire other people who kind of already have it in them to want to engage with technology. I would never tell someone, come into this field. No, if they already don't have that passion. I think that you got to do what interests you, or like some good mentors that I met along my education said, if you're not passionate about what you do, you cannot be innovative. You cannot do original work. So if I were to inspire them, I think that I could just share my vision about technology, which is never disconnected from society and human beings. It's never, even when you talk about technology, unless it's like an engineering publication, like just technical, whenever you talk about technology, if you really scratch beyond the surface, it's never about the technology. It's always about what it means to us, what purpose it serves for humans, how humans receive it, what problems it may cause to humans. So it's a little bit like science fiction. Okay, it's literature, it's fantasy, but Isaac Asimov, in the preface of a collection of novels, once wrote many, many years later that the novels were published. This was a collection. He said, it's not that you have to look at these novels and see which ones came true, because that's not the purpose of science fiction literature, to guess what will be. Science fiction just creates a scenario where, it's about the technology that does not exist. So it's very sexy for some people, but it sets the conditions for a human scenario to play out. Before anyone had cars, before cars existed, if someone could envision that cars existed, one could argue, well, what happens is then everybody has a car, then we're going to have traffic jams, and you cannot find a parking spot. And what happens when you don't find a parking spot? Then you may argue with someone or be late or get a specific type of nervous that our ancestors didn't know. So it's the human scenario. Sorry for the little bit of detour, but whenever I think of a new technology and you can play with it and get excited, I always think, how do people use it? What difference does it make to them? What difference do the services that come to us now make in our life? That things are faster, easier. Some things are not easier yet. I'm so mad with designers, sometimes software designer, interface designers. I really think there's often lots of room for improvement in how these devices adapt to us. They should make our lives much easier. But to go back to your question, I think that that's the key to be more inspired by this field, because it's not cold and detached about things. It's not about things at all. It's very much about humans. And at the same time, if you become a technologist and then you bring these things to a wider audience, that's your message. You're not speaking technical specs of a new product. That exists too. But when Steve Jobs was presenting a new product on the stage and everything, that wasn't about how wide the screen is and how this works. He was talking about a vision. You see, especially Apple build a brand behind a style, a design, elegance and minimalism, and a vision. So that's what you talk about when you talk about technology, about people. So that's interesting, right?
Yep. That's very interesting. And as you mentioned, actually, that is very true, that technology and creativity, though both the things goes hand in hand, actually. You have to be creative when you are working with the technology. So you can't just be mundane, actually, coming and, doing your job. It's moreover about creativity as well. And as you mentioned about the Steve Jobs, yes, Steve Jobs has like your very specific time, like, even though Microsoft had acquired all the market, they come up with something which grabbed the people attentions. And that happened because of the vision and the creativity that they had. So thank you so much for sharing that and highlighting those points. Next, one more question that we have is more specific about your job role, actually. So what technology journalists do? I think people are not much aware of that kind of a role in the technology.
What's the question again? What
technology journalists do?
Oh, tech journalists do. Well, they can do many different things. They can, explain a new technology to a wider audience, which is really how it works, which you may not necessarily need to be a user of that thing. But if you're interested, you might want to know what's behind the scenes a little bit. And your job is to know enough. That's why, the PhD in computer science comes in handy. I know enough to understand these things, and this has always been my place, because, I have a PhD in computer science, but up to a master's degree level. I have 2 master's degrees in music and musicology. So I come from the humanities on the other side. It wasn't painless to switch, but I did it with great passion. And I've always been this link between the 2 fields. So I know enough to understand, but I can translate that to that effectively to, my mom or someone like that, because it's easy for me. And that comes with the personality and your personal history. Nobody can really teach you that, to put myself in the shoes of someone like that, or you can go back to my childhood and imagine me asking my dad, what is this? I'm extremely curious. So it's easy for me to put myself in the shoes of someone who would ask oftentimes dumb questions, like, what is this? Why is this so? What's this for? So the way I try to explain technology when I do is always in a way that satisfies the reader or the listener. It's not, I explain to you, like from my ex cathedra, in scientific technical terms, because sometimes, have you noticed, you listen to an explanation, a definition of something, it sounds beautiful, you feel that it's correct and all, and at the end you're like, but I didn't get that. Explain to me, like, so that I understand. You do a public service by doing that, because if we don't know how any of this works, we are alienated from our environment. We already don't know how the washing machine works, but these things, we really, really, we live in symbiosis with them. So, some knowledge, some understanding is very good for the users to have. In every interview I do on cybersecurity, the experts say that the software designers and experts must do their part, but the users also must know what the risks are and what they are doing. It's a little bit like with law, sort of ignorance is not tolerated to some extent with technology. So you explain, back to your question, you explain the technology, and sometimes that's mostly what you can comment on technology. You can already present, you're not a neutral channel, but you can express your opinion if you have one. You may, as a technologist, criticizing a technology, raising, issues on, we've all heard about exposing personal data. Or is it true or not that this 5G, 6G, waves hurt our health? Is it true or not? It's things that are not certain yet, all these privacy issues, you can comment on them and try to, not just impose your view on the audience, but start a dialogue and a conversation. I think that's hugely important, because for the most part, this technology comes prepackaged. It's not really do it yourself. You use your phone as is. It's not customizable more than much. So everything you have around you comes from businesses, and oftentimes big companies, large corporations. It's always good as users, as a people of the world, to keep these manufacturers in check. What are they doing? Because they really impact our lives. So I don't have short answers. You can stop me. Two things: explain technology.
No, it's great to listen as well, right? It's very valuable points that you are mentioning. So the first valid point that you mentioned, and which is very important when we are dealing with the technology, is that communication, or explaining that technology is there to simplify the ways we do the work. It is not too complex the things. So that is very valid point, actually. So people out there would definitely find it interesting that technology is a lot more about simplifying the things rather than making it complicated. So if your technology is making things complicated, then definitely that is not a technology which is going to have the long-term, vision or long-term sustainability in the market. So those are very valid points, and thank you so much for sharing. Moving towards our next segment is the fun segment, where I'm going to give you 3 keywords, and you have to tell me whatever comes to your mind. Those keywords are associated with your profile, actually. And you have to just tell me kind of a replacement keyword or kind of a short definition. So whatever comes to your mind, it is just like, instinct thing. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah. So the first word is music.
Passion.
Oh, wow. Second is technology.
Excuse me?
Second word is technology.
Fun.
And the third word is podcast.
Lots of work.
No, I can see that actually the way you were telling me the minute details also, right? So definitely shows your passion towards it.
You must know that.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that. I am just a beginner, actually. I don't have like a huge experience yet, but I'm learning from my guest also. Actually, I'm getting a lot of mentorship,
Well,
like
this is my first time on the other side. My first time on this side. Never been a guest before. So.
Oh, that's great. Great to have you then.
I'm not in control. I feel nervous.
No, you are doing great, actually. So thank you so much for being my show. I'm really overwhelmed now to listen to that. So moving towards our next segment is about your career work and volunteering, where I have shortlisted a couple of questions for you. So the first question that we have is, your educational background is in computer science and music. how do you see your educational background helping you in your current profession, or how do you see important of it in your day-to-day life, day-to-day, like a job? Yeah.
I know the answer. I know the answer. The answer is, I know many people study something in college or university and then have to find a job. How what I studied helps me is a tricky question. Since the beginning, since before, when I was 16, then 20, I have pursued my passions, which have always been actually music and technology. So I went through my education. You know, there wasn't a program at university that would combine these two things like that. So I chose music first, and then I switched and I went to computer science, and I made my own profile. Sometimes that backfires because you don't fit in neither community, but you know, who cares? I do what I love, and sometimes the reward is great. So how does it help me? It doesn't help me. It is what I do. It is my profile, but not because I had the education and the degree. It's because I had the passion even before going to university, and it's never been a straight line. It's not that easy. You know, you take detours. And I've been a musician for a few years, period. Like I wasn't dealing with technology at all, more than any one of us does in everyday life. I feel at my age right now that things just converge.
Yeah.
That's a very good way of putting it, because I was a journalist also before I did my PhD for a couple of years. I've had a gap between my master degree and my PhD. And in between, I was a journalist, I was a teacher, I was a musician. And look, all of this now just converges and comes together. So this is how it helps me. Was there another part to the question?
No, that was the question actually. So it is more about, as you took it like the right way, that most of the times people don't find their passion and they take the education and then they are doing something else in their day-to-day job. So how do you see it aligned with your profession? Because it is very much aligned, right? Whatever education you did, but as you mentioned that you found your passion, you did your education because you were passionate about that field. And that is a very valid point. Sometimes people struggle to get that passion. And I think it's okay to experiment if you are not able to find the passion early at your age about any specific field. So thank you so much for sharing. And moving towards one more question under that segment, which is any of your interesting research project or any of your favorite topic of discussion on your podcast, would you like to share with the audience?
Well, I'm really curious. I'm really, really curious. So I'm interested in so many topics, especially because I get to speak to these experts of each thing that I know something about, but there's so much you can ask to the expert. One of my favorite topics is cybersecurity, because from a technical point of view, technical scientific point of view, it's super complex. It's always nice to hear them try to explain to you, because oftentimes I don't believe we even can without having all the mathematical background and all of that. Number two, philosophy is involved even. You can link it with that. And third, I was lucky enough to meet some people that showed to me how cybersecurity, which always evoked images of something greatly technical in my mind, is actually something very socially relevant. So cybersecurity, again, can be approached from the point of view of the algorithms and all of that protocols, but it's a lot about the people again. So cybersecurity is a wide topic that I love to talk about. And then also the relationship between technology and society, the coevolution of technology and society. My podcast is called Technoculture. You know, the word was coined many years ago in a specific context. And I don't use it in that way, but the first time I heard it without knowing the context, it just spoke to me. I said, that's it. That's technoculture in one word. Sounds nice. That's what I do. So my podcast is called Technoculture. And that's what I like to talk about.
Yes, and you're a perfect guest for my podcast actually. And the way I grabbed the attention towards is because of your podcast, Technoculture. The name itself is very catchy, and through my podcast also, we are talking about a culture that we are in. So thank you so much for being my guest. Uh, Moving towards our next segment is tips or advice. You already gave a lot of tips actually. So just to summarize in this particular section and give references to the students about any books or the courses that you would like to recommend them who are looking to build their career in this particular field or grow in it and looking this as their long-term career option.
Well, I don't know what you mean exactly by in this field and this career, because
so it is more about technology and computer science. And how do you see that? Like, how kind of advice would you like to give to them?
It's so huge. You can be so many different things. You can be a developer, a designer, a project manager. You can be so many different things that it's really hard to point you to one direction. I would, if you let me, since I did not prepare like a list of books and titles and stuff to read, I could turn your question around and just say, as something that I feel the responsibility of, if you want to have a career in technology, whatever role you have, even if it's in plain sight or you're more working behind the scenes, you will have an impact on people's lives. So if you want to pursue this career, I hope you like it and it matches what you like to do, but always remember that you will have an impact on people's lives. So don't do it lightly. There will be a little bit of you in whatever work you do that then comes out on the other side as technology, hardware, or software, or the way something is presented, the community that is reached by your product, or the product that you contributed with a little piece to. So that just a call for responsibility, social responsibility.
Wow, very wise actually. And I'm just loving talking to you. But just because of the time limit, we are moving towards the closure segment, which is more about leadership. And the way you are talking, I can definitely tell that you are a leader in your area of interest. So what is your leadership style, and any specific leader that you always follow or admire, and why?
Well, I thank you because you're calling me a leader. Yes. I work as a freelancer for the most part now, so I don't have my group. I don't have anyone to coordinate. But when I was at university, first as a doctorate student and also a couple of years after that as a postdoctoral researcher, I have had great mentoring. So I really have a model to look up to on, how you build the group, how you set the conditions so that people can work well, how you do take the best out of people. And so my leadership style, if I had a team, would be precisely that of, me, the leader. You're not the watchdog. You try to take the best out of people. And try to interfere with that the least possible. I think that's, my network, people are the greatest asset of my career and of my life, because many of them I'm so lucky to call friends. So when you work with some people, if you're in this role of the boss or what I like to do is to take the best out of people. I don't have a team right now. So the only other way I can think of myself as a leader is in this indirect way, through my work, through my clips, by influencing someone. And I don't have a huge following for now. So I'm happy you're having me on your podcast. It feels like bit by bit, some things are coming together. I wish I had more traction, but that has to come with time because I feel I still need to grow a lot. But I know that for one person that leaves a comment, there are seriously around 100 that thought something and didn't tell you. Something positive, let's say, negative, positive, I don't care. But every now and then, casually, someone told me how one of my clips impacted them. And I'm always floored. Like, I had no idea. So even if I don't know it, I know that I'm making an impact at some level out there. So what's my style in that? I cannot have a leadership style in that. It's just, I really believe in the job I do, and I'm trying to find my style, which is never spectacular. I hate to spectacularize science and technology because it is interesting enough, by the way. You don't have to make it catchy with, you know, and because I believe it's important, so I don't want to trivialize it by making fun of it and making jokes. I love comedy. Some communication is so well done with jokes and stuff. I haven't crafted that yet. It's not my style. So I would call myself a little bit old school, you know, in that. So that's my style. And the people who appreciate that watch. And some of them I know take something home from that.
Yep. And you are doing great, actually. I have listened to a couple of podcast episodes. And as you mentioned, influencing others is also one of the leadership style. You don't have to have the team, actually. Leading your own life and own passion is also kind of a leadership. So you are doing great, and really appreciate all your time and consideration being on the Solid Saturday. This was definitely a very valuable as well as insightful episode for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I love doing this, and good luck with your own show.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that is all about Federica and the way she's leading her area of interest. Before we close, I'm going to have a closure quote from Lyndon B. Johnson. And the quote says, "If future generations are to remember us more with gratitude than sorrow, we must achieve more than just the miracles of technology. We must also leave them a glimpse of the world as it was created, not just as it looked when we got through with it." And on that quote, we are closing today's episode. See you guys in the next episode. Until we meet, happy leading. Let's lead together. Stay safe. Bye for now.